welcome to Thursday Checkdown. I'm your host, Greg Kellogg, and I'm joined by the one and only IDP Iggy. Tipp is working late. He had a problem with the crane system. He's doing longshoreman work, so we just want him to stay safe. But in the meantime, Iggy, welcome back, baby.
Hey, man, Greg, great to be here with you. I don't know if I can fill Tipp's shoes, but I'll do my best. And it's good to be back and talking football and seeing the friends and everybody. So let's get it rolling. We got a great guest today.
Yeah, we do. Actually, we got somebody's baby tonight. He's got to be somebody's baby, Mr. Doug Orth. Bring him in, JC. Hey, Doug, how you? Look at that face. You know he's somebody's baby.
Even though I was only about 5 or 6 years old, Jackson Brown was writing about me. So
That's right.
Nobody puts baby in a corner, right?
Not that one. No. But, well, I was challenged, and I love my music. And Doug's girlfriend, significant other, Carla, said he's everybody's baby. And then I think Doug said there's got to be a song for that. So I found a song.
I know the only correction we have to make is I think Jackson was writing about a woman, so I can't put myself.
He, these days, who knows what the difference is?
We've lost half of the audience by talking about Jackson Brown as it is. So.
Oh yeah,
no, Jackson Brown's a genius.
Yeah,
Jackson Brown wrote several Eagles hits. I mean, he's a great writer. He is.
Songwriters, man.
Oh, yeah, he's great. But we're here to talk football and the history of fantasy football. Now, Doug, I don't think we met before the Expo, did we?
Nope, that's the first time.
So people out there, get to the Expo. You get to meet the heavyweights. Now, I'm sporting a new background. Everybody knows I'm a Lions fan, so that's why the Lions are up. And the NFL draft symbol is up because we're going to do a special show, hopefully in the next week. And we're going to break down the past 3 drafts for the Detroit Lions because I think Brad Holmes is the most underrated GM in the NFL. I think that guy's a genius. But we'll get into that in another show. This show, Doug, tell us about your first fantasy gig. When did you start? When did you start playing? When did you start writing? And then we're going to get into your FSWA finalist, what article, and do you know how you finished or just that you didn't win?
The latter. I just know that. Yeah.
Then you were obviously second.
Second, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way that works.
I was in the tie for first. They just didn't have time to mention the second, 1A and 1B. They didn't have time to mention it.
It happened.
Yeah.
Well, did you lose to a younger man, an older man, or a female?
Younger man. Article of the year went to Brian Drake, and he's in his early 40s. And I don't know about Adam Harstead. I'm guessing he's younger, but I haven't met him.
All right. Well, maybe
both great articles though.
That was right. He was writer of the year. Adam, sorry, I didn't make that clear.
So you were up for 2 awards.
Yes.
Yep. Man, that's amazing, man. Great stiff competition, man. JC, Doug, where can we find that article? Maybe our producer, JC, behind there in the booth over there can put it up the link so people can go read that amazing piece.
Yeah. So the article was my big board, my preseason big board, which would have my second big board would have come out probably the 3rd week of August or like about 2 full weeks before the start of the season. And the funny
do that article this year, right?
Oh God, yeah. I've been doing big board since 2006, so yeah.
Oh man, that's nice.
When did you start playing?
Yeah, started playing in '99. Went with 4 teams. I'm not sure why I went with 4 teams my first year, but I did. All three leagues. I think 2 were on AOL for all those boomers out there.
People don't even remember AOL was AOL was the internet.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Really was.
2 on the AOL, I think 1 on Yahoo. I don't know, but I had 4 leagues and was I'd like sometimes like to tell the story of how I arrived at fantasy football. So it was, I believe it had been the summer or fall of '98. And keep in mind here, I was a Bengals fan for 25 years. I started the year before they lost in the Super Bowl to the 49ers the second time, which was the '88 Super Bowl. So I started becoming a fan in '86, I believe. And but for the longest time, the Bengals' claim to fame was injuring Bo Jackson in the '90 playoffs, right? And then once they hurt Bo Jackson, they didn't make the playoffs again until I think Carson Palmer in 05-06. Anyhow, so the only way I was ever going to be able to watch the Bengals was going down to the local watering hole. I was in Kansas at the time, and so going down to the local watering hole and watching them on DirecTV. And people would come in, and over there at Central Time Zone, so people would come in at 3:00 Central Time, and it just drove me up a wall. Hey, how did McNabb do, or how did this guy do, right? And my thought process the whole time is, guys, football is about team. It's not about individuals. What are we doing here? And why is that the first question out of your mouth when you come into the ball, right? So anyhow, I had some time to think about it during the off season. Like, okay, I spend an outrageous amount of my time watching it and talking about sports. Why am I not making money doing this? So after various self discussions, I guess, I arrived at fantasy football, and then that's how I got into it the first year. So I played four leagues the first year, won 2 of them, and then I've been playing for money ever since. And it became pretty clear to me that I had a knack for this that first year.
Okay.
Nice. I mean,
so
99. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. A lot of St. Louis Rams, particularly with you being, you said in Kansas. Did you have a lot of Rams with that team?
Yeah, I believe I know one for sure. I'm not sure if both teams had Marshall Faulk on the championship teams, but I had Marshall Faulk. I think the first pick I ever made was Marshall Faulk, and that was just pure luck. But yeah, that's probably where my fascination with running backs may have started. But it was just a running back league back then. It was, for the most of the history of the NFL, it has been a running back league. I think a lot of the people that have become fans of the NFL in the last 10 years don't understand that it was the bulk of the history of the league has been built on the running game. So it's been hard to make that transition from you got to have. And I don't believe in robust running back or zero running back. I believe in picking the best players, but I think there is an emphasis on which players you need to take. So with that said, if you give me the option of 300 touch running backs in the first 2 rounds, I'm going to take 2 300 touch running backs in the first 2 rounds. I'm not going to go into a draft with a preconceived notion that I have to draft these positions because you miss out on the value.
Absolutely. You're preaching to the choir over here with Greg and I. We're running back enthusiasts. It's kind of hard for us to make that transition at times, I think, as well.
Yeah.
I don't. I absolutely will not do zero running back. For me, Doug, it comes down to positional scarcity and positional scoring differential. In other words, I went first round, 5th pick overall with Travis Kelce, because 6 out of the last 7 years, while now 7 out of the last 8 years, he has finished as the number 1 tight end. And his scoring differential between number 1 and number 12 is greater than any other position. Those 2 things make him more valuable than any other position. Now, what people have done to make wide receivers more important is that they've gone with 3 or 4 wide receivers plus 2 or 3 flex positions. There's 32 running backs that are viable starters in the NFL. You can throw in another 5 or 10 that get significant part-time touches. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's not the starter. David Montgomery started every game except for when he was hurt. But he gets enough touches that he's a viable fantasy starter for you.
Yep.
but there's just not that many people that do that. I would say there's probably 10 to 15 viable starting running backs any given week. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
And then I would also say there's probably 30 to 40 viable starting wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean the most popular formation now is 11 personnel, so 3 receivers. So now, granted, not every team, in fact, probably half the teams don't make great use of that, 11 personnel, but that still is putting 96 receivers into in a full week. We're putting 96 receivers into the potential, and that's what you want. Receivers, you want potential performance.
Absolutely.
Outside of those top 10, obviously the top 10 maybe get 8 to 10 targets a week, but after that, you just want to be put in position to score. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so you got into this to make money. I'll come back to you in a second, Iggy. You
No,
got
go
into
ahead.
this to make money, not just to play and have fun. I got in just to play, just to have fun, the competition. I decided to write when I started reading other people and vehemently disagreeing with a lot of them. And Iggy knows me. I know that I'm smarter than most people. Okay, I understand that. I actually have a 138 IQ, which makes me statistically smarter than most people. That said, I truly believe that the best of the best in fantasy sports, and I'm including guys like Scotty Ingo and Bob Harris in these best of the best, John Hansen, they're going to be wrong 40% of the time. The very best are going to be wrong 40% of the time. So I don't think there's any real true experts. There's just people that are better than the serious players. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think I've heard my good friend Jim Coventry say it first. I don't know if he's the first one to say it, but he's the first one I've heard say it. In fantasy, we're looking for that 5%, advantage. So if everybody's batting at 55% and we're able to get to that 60, we're exponentially ahead of the game. So even at 5%, I mean, if you're having one of those years where instead of maybe 6 out of 10, you were able to get 8 out of 10 right at receiver, for example. So we're talking receivers. That's probably unrealistic, but maybe you had 8 in the top 15 receivers, something like that, where you're just. I was heavily invested in Keenan Allen this year, for example. I don't think that he was heavily invested, or he was highly ranked by the industry as a whole. So I benefited for those first 12 weeks. I benefited greatly from having Keenan Allen, who was operating as a receiver 3 for me in some of my leagues. He was playing at a wide receiver 1 level. So that's you kind of win at the margins in this hobby. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Your turn, Iggy.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I just, spur of the moment kind of thought is, do you think that there's going to be a rise of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, or to attack the zone? That's a piece I'm kind of rough drafting right now. Is defenses playing more zones as an IDP guy, and how that's going to impact the tight end, or do you think it's just going to benefit better slot wide receivers? What are your thoughts on that, Doug?
The league has to the college game has to be able to produce enough quality tight ends where 12 personnel becomes the primary offense. It's 12 personnel is great in theory, especially if both of the tight ends that are seeing significant playing time are good blockers. With that said, the league is kind of operating. Teams are usually just happy to have one good receiving tight end and one good blocking tight end, and they're not. I'm sure the people roll their eyes when I make this comparison. People aren't looking to put Kyle Pitts and Brock Bowers together. Now,
they're looking for Brock Wright and Sam Laporta. Both are decent. Both are decent blockers. Brock Wright is an excellent blocker, but Sam Laporta is an excellent receiver and a decent blocker. So when you go 12, usually only one of them is going to be a primary receiving option. That doesn't mean Brock Wright can't catch. He can. He's just not Sam Laporta type. And I think that it's team dependent. It's absolutely team dependent. Let me ask you about
Well,
Superflex.
if I could,
Yeah, go ahead.
I could add. So I think the slot receiver is going to remain pretty important for the foreseeable future. There was something else I wanted to add to that, but I just wanted to answer.
No, add to it.
Yeah, no, I can't remember right now.
Okay.
To answer your question, Iggy, I think the slot receiver, especially as long as there's receivers that are willing to run 5-yard patterns and fall forward for another 3, as long as there's receivers willing to do that, there's going to be a place to go for them.
There was a comment that came up while we were talking.
Okay.
Big draft energy. Speak, Greg. Speak. I absolutely agree with what this gentleman's saying. What drives me nuts is I've said for years that the best of the best are wrong 40% of the time. Now, there's no scientific study I've done, but I think it's very important. And on this show, in season, each of our people recommend a stud to sit. Now, when you say stud, that can mean various things to different people. So I narrowed it down, top 12 at your position. If you're top 12 at your position, you should be starting in fantasy. And if you're top 12, what we're saying is that stud that week won't finish in the top 12. But we take it a little deeper. For wide receivers and running backs, we say that back or receiver won't finish in the top 24. If they finish 13 to 24, we call it a tie. Outside the top 12, we say we got to win because they didn't finish in the top 12. But quarterbacks and tight ends, we're only going with one because most leagues don't start to, except for Superflex. And that's what I wanted to hit you with. I played in my very first Superflex 2 years ago, Scott Fishbowl.
Yep.
I hate Superflex. And I'll tell you why. I believe it creates an artificial shortage of a position and forces you to draft quarterbacks early and to take a chance on a 4th quarterback, usually a backup, because by then all the starters are gone. What's your feeling on Superflex? Do you like it? Do you hate it? I would do away with it. I would make it illegal. That's how much I despise it. But
yeah, I almost agree word for word with what you said. And the only other thing I'll add is that people like Superflex supporters like to say it enhances, especially the ones that you can start 2 quarterbacks on, obviously, will say that it enhances the value of the elite quarterbacks. I would counter and say it tries to make relevant, or actually it ends up wasting roster spots, because wasting roster spots and like you said, sucking the life out of the position, creating an artificial demand or a lack of supply at a position that doesn't need to have it, that can't afford to have it, where there aren't 24 quarterbacks who are starting in fantasy.
Now, if they could equalize the scoring between quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, so that the top guy scored the same number of points and the 12th guy scored the same number of points, then the shortage isn't there because you could start a different position rather than a second quarterback. But quarterbacks outscore every other position so greatly, you have to go quarterback. Iggy, do you take a different approach in your?
I really pride myself on my charity league, and with the IDP players, I've kind of set it to where the defense makes as many points as the quarterback. So that's how I tried to approach that balance with the super flex. When you play with 16 teams, you kind of need as many, options as you can defensively and offensively. But I don't mind super flex. I think, it takes me a little bit to take, like, if something new comes out, I don't want to be the first one to kind of experience with it. Even though I accept change and I'm all for it, it's like, yeah, you try it first and let me kind of see the effects of it. I'll plug some data and I come around to it. I like super flex if you're in a bigger league, simply for the options. But I do stress a balanced point system, because, if you have a balanced point system, if you have, for example, a good tight end matchup one week and they even have a a bonus on them, which I don't incorporate in my leagues. But if they do, then it balances out, you know. And on a rough bye week, you should be able to have as much variety as you think as you can have. So I'm saying I'm for the super flex, to sum it up.
I'll throw one other thing in there, Greg.
Sure.
One quarterback leagues, especially if you have a top of the line starter, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, most of the time, not Patrick Mahomes outside of this year. Those, one of those three, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
You usually can get away with one quarterback. In a super flex league, you almost have to roster three. That to me is the kind of stuff that I don't like to.
But even in a 12-team league, 3 quarterbacks means you got 36. There's only 32 teams.
Somebody's got Sam Darnold.
Somebody's got backups.
Oh, yeah, that's what Sam Darnold. Yeah, somebody's got to roll Sam Darnold.
Iggy, you got to ask Doug about IDP. You have to.
Oh, yeah, Doug. I mean, do you play? Have you a lot of experience with IDP playing or not? I know you're a big auction guy. We're gonna get into that pretty soon too.
With my process, with the preseason matchup analysis that I do, you would think I'd be an IDP guy. I haven't found a scoring system, nor do I want to create one to play IDP. So I have not played IDP.
Man, we may have to get you in the charity league. Try it out.
One of my goals this year is to get Doug's significant other in a fantasy league. I want to get Wendy and Carla together into a league. And we could make it IDP and have Doug in it too.
Yeah, I am all for it, man.
Just think, Carla, you would have bragging rights against Doug.
Yeah, that happens too. Christina's beating me.
Go ahead, Iggy.
That's all I was saying is, yeah, it happens. My wife's beating me. She's made it to a championship in a league. So come on, Carla, it'll be fun.
Okay, I'll throw another thing out there. It's going to be hard to convince me in the IDP, and I have some other thoughts on it too. The
IDP auction. IDP auction.
One of my biggest complaints with IDP is especially if you're rostering defensive backs, for example, quarterbacks specifically, right? Okay. The ones that you're targeting are also the ones that the quarterbacks are targeting, because you want opportunity for your quarterbacks, and L'Jarius Sneed and Patrick Surtain most years, those guys aren't getting the opportunities to rack up tackles, interceptions.
Darrelle Revis. Nobody ever, because they wouldn't throw at him. Nobody ever drafted.
And I know that the argument might fall on deaf ears when I talk to an IDP lifer or an IDP pro. But
yeah, well, it's not all about tackles. Okay,
right?
You can score pass breakups. You can score all kinds of things on the defensive side. I love my fantasy league because I grew up with Mike Hall in the industry. And my fantasy league for years was the only system that could really do complex scoring systems. Used to be, when I got started, everybody knew by the end of the game whether they won or not, because there weren't yardage bonuses. There was just it was just scoring.
Yeah.
And so you knew if your guy scored a touchdown or if your kicker kicked a field goal. So it was really easy to score. But with all the bonuses, half point for tight ends and tackles, assists, third down stops for team defense. I mean, third down conversion. Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer in very complex systems that you have to have a system like Sleeper or Underdog to score for you. If you want to know at that time whether you won or not. Doug, you like complex or simple? Or in between?
Let's go. My process is complex. I prefer my scoring and my everything else, the execution, the actual execution on game day to be relatively straightforward. So I'm not a fan of tight end premium either. So just so we're clear, I can remember the day, and I feel like I was a little bit behind the curve on this one when PPR was really starting to gain momentum around. I think I played in my first PPR league around 2009, and and thought that was like some. Well, it was almost sacrilegious that I was doing so because again, running backs. And then I said, like I said, I think I played my first PPR league that just because, if I recall, the platform I was playing on was starting to go more heavy on PPR and less so on standard. And so I was almost forced to go into PPR. And, almost probably 2 years later, I couldn't have imagined not doing PPR. So it struck pretty quickly that, this is the way to go. But, to answer your question, I prefer it be more simple. I want to be able to look at a box score at the end of the day or watch. I don't watch a lot of red zone, or at least I don't try to. It just depends on what's on TV. I'm here in the Northeast. I don't get a lot of good football watching the Jets, Patriots lately, and Giants lately.
You got the Eagles.
Yeah, no, but they don't show them here. And they only show them when they're on the Sunday night game or the Thursday night game or the Monday night game. So sometimes the game of the week, that'll be like Philadelphia, Dallas, or one of the more.
Who's your favorite team, Doug?
I don't have
Cincinnati, right? Or you said it was Cincinnati.
No, I can tell that story too. I guess it was Cincinnati for 25 years, then it was Houston for about 8 or 9. My transition from Cincinnati was funny. I was already kind of starting to get perturbed about the lack of spending in Cincinnati over the
Brown, Mr. Brown,
Mr. Mike Brown, and there was an avenue I thought. This was when Ahmad Bradshaw was in his free agent year. So Cedric Benson, God rest his soul, he was free agent. Ahmad Bradshaw was free agent that same year. I want to say it was 2010, 2011. It was somewhere in there. And I saw a clip or I saw a note. Bengals hosting Ahmad Bradshaw for a free agent. I knew he wasn't going to be a 300 touchback. He never was that. But I like the idea that Cincinnati was thinking about actually adding explosiveness to the backfield, which they really hadn't had since Corey Dillon, and before that it was James Brooks. I mean, it was a long stretch where they. Kijana Carter would have had.
Kijana Carter, yeah. I was about to say.
Joe Mixon was a 300 touch guy.
Yeah, but
we're talking
like 10 years.
That's after you punted him, huh?
Yeah, yeah. We're talking like 2010 or so.
Yeah.
When did you go for the Texans?
Yeah, so it was shortly after that.
Or was it the Oilers at the time?
But no.
It would have been the Texans.
This happened around. I'm going to say it's like 2011. But my point being was that they were flying in Ahmad Bradshaw for a visit. I'm thinking, okay, thankfully the Bengals are doing something right in free agency for a change. And a couple hours later, we're re-signing Cedric Benson, and that was it. I was done.
Boy, you're not a Cedric Benson guy. He started at Chicago, right?
Yeah. Played his college ball at Texas. Oh yeah, he was a good player. He was
not
what
bad teams.
He was what the Bengals were playing with for a lot of their years of struggle was just not a compiler. He was just a volume back who unamazing, inexplosive. All the words that you don't want to use with running backs. That's what he was. Except
Sadly,
his running style was very reminiscent of Marshawn Lynch, except Marshawn Lynch never stopped. He would hit you 3 times on the same run.
Yeah, but Cedric Benson had way more carries in college. He was already, he was the leading all-time rusher when he retired, I believe, right? Or, I can't remember if he passed Ron Dane or not at that point, but I'm pretty sure he did. And I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting era, And so, were you around for Arian Foster? Did he give you a championship or?
That was one of my best all-time calls.
Let's hear it.
I will say Rudy Johnson is another guy that Rudy Johnson in the will be gone Bengals era, or my fandom with the Bengals anyway. So that year that Arian Foster come out, or not so much he came out, he was undrafted because I guess he had some personality quirks or he rubbed some coaches the wrong way. He's undrafted free agent. believe he joined the Texans. He may have been on the practice squad at the beginning of the year. I didn't start hearing about him doing anything on the practice squad or in practices until later that year. And then the following year, this is when Gary Kubiak was, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't think he was the head coach yet, but I could be wrong. And they had Kyle Shanahan in there for a short bit too. But anyway,
Andre Johnson was the wide receiver.
Yes.
So they had the run and the pass.
Matt Schaub was the quarterback. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was really taken. They played Dallas in a preseason game, and you don't put a lot of weight into. And I think that was the third week. That was the all important third week.
I do. I look at that third week. Yeah. That's very important.
And oh boy, I'm sorry, big draft.
Well, Trent Richardson was big drafts first. Arian Foster was JC's first. I don't know if you saw it when it flashed up. I think my first, it was 88. And I want to say it was Barry. Was Barry Sanders playing until 89? Is that when he retired?
89.
Start in 89.
Yeah, I think
he definitely started in 89 or in the 80s.
Okay, so it wasn't Barry. So
right.
It was,
or did he start 90?
Maybe Thurman Thomas was the first.
I'm pretty sure Sanders was drafted in 89.
Yeah, 89. So he played till 99, basically.
Yeah.
9 years, 98. But I remember I started in 88. I thought it was 86, but I just saw an old bio I had done years ago that said 88. And if that's the case, then my first pick was probably Thurman Thomas. And I remember my first league, everybody had their favorite teams. And nobody knew what fantasy football was, so everybody drafted their players from their favorite teams. I'd take the best players from a bunch. I won my first 3 years because I was the only one drafting from other teams. You ever have that kind of experience? Either of you two?
Oh, God, no.
Well, by the time you got in 99, people understood how to play.
Yeah, the only thing we didn't have that we have now, the injury reporting was still very back then.
No.
But I'm sure you had worse. I'm sure you had worse.
2009, Steve Cohen had the Pro Football News and Injury Report that was outstanding. He called every single team in the NFL, and he published that religiously. Steve Cohen and John Hansen teamed up in FanX, won 3 years in a row because they had all the top information.
Yeah.
Information is king. But I want to get to your writing before I turn it back to Iggy. You write for FF Today now. Who did you start writing for?
A site that didn't last very long, Touchdown Fantasy Sports.
Okay.
I don't know if you
tell us about it.
Well, there's not much to tell. I started playing the second year, so it must have been 2000. The years kind of run together, but I felt like I said here a few minutes ago, I could tell that I had a kind of a knack for this that first year. So I guess I decided I hate the term expert. I decided I was good enough to be an analyst my second year already, and somebody agreed with me. But I think we went 1 year before some people from that, I think the vice president of that site, and then one of his I don't know, friends or whatever, decided to break off from Touchdown Fantasy Sports, and then I joined what was called Fantasy Sports Junkies.
Okay.
And that didn't last very long either. There was the promise that we were going to get paid, which was kind of a big deal in 2001, 2002, that we were going to get paid after about 6 months and that never happened. So that site eventually folded as well. So then there was. I continued to play, but I wasn't actively writing again until I bothered. My brother actually turned me on to FF Today, and this is when Matt Waldman still, of course, of the rookie scout portfolio, and you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with that. I would reach out to him every so often. I guess I kind of had his ear maybe back then. I'm not sure, but I kind of went through him to see if he would reach out to the owner, Mike Kruger, and then that's how that essentially got started. I started right from like the next year, kind of started a very primitive form of preseason matchup analysis, kind of laid out how I did it back then, which again, compared to what I do now, is a very primitive version of it. The whole methodology began on the premise that I didn't want my players playing against the Ravens or the Steelers in the fantasy playoffs back in 2004, 2005, and on and on. And then as I got to thinking about it more and more, I saw the potential of if I could devote enough time to this to basically lay out the season or target individual matchups, as it were. And again, and we've talked, Greg, you and I have talked about this on previous shows, but I know there's no such thing as a true shadow corner. You're lucky if you get a guy that covers a quarterback that covers another receiver 60% of the time, much less 80, 85, 90. I mean, maybe Darrell Lewis did that in some games, but I don't think we've really seen it since Revis. But
everybody was afraid of Dion because of his potential to pick a pass and take it to the house. But Darrell Revis was, in my opinion, in my lifetime, I grew up with Lynn Barney and Dick LeBeau and loved those guys. But Darrell Revis shut people down. He would take Hall of Fame wide receivers, and they just wouldn't throw to him. Late in his career, I think he started getting picked on a little bit. But there were 4 or 5 years where nobody would throw at Revis.
I wanted to add something from 5 minutes ago. I think Iggy asked this question. I was talking about Arian Foster. I think I had 11 leagues that year. I think I had Foster on 8 of them. I was so convinced what I was seeing wasn't a fake that that was one of my best years for sure. Before this year, that was one of my best years.
Man, nice. Yeah, I do love that. I had some questions real quick. We see the belt behind you. The year 2020 as a fellow Kings Classic member. Which division are you in? I mean, that's a complex league, I think that, that's a dynamic league, a lot of pros. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that belt? And then we might segue into a little bit of like an auction talk as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm one of the originals. We started the Kings Classic in 2018. So I've been in the George Blandon division ever since. Won it, as you noted, I won it in 2020. Still one of the best teams I think I've ever put together. And it was more of the league, my league mates allowing me to draft these players as it was at my own being sharp that year. It was that was my first eye-opening experience in terms of building around receivers. And keep in mind, this is 14-team league, right? And I think I had, because I had the Green Bay Packer combo that year. I had Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. That was one of the years Aaron Jones stayed healthy for most of the year. And then, so that was a good enough start, right? But then the running backs were just dried up by the third round. And so I just kept banging away. I had Calvin Ridley in his 90-catch year. I had Mike Evans falling around. I was throwing out Tariq Cohen most weeks and still winning because that's just my second running back was Tariq Cohen or Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams obviously has still been Aaron Jones' handcuff.
Yeah, so, that was a handcuff, yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, that league, I hated initially when they went from 12 to 14. It started out as a 12-team league. And I had never played in a 14-team league, but just the people that are in that room make it worth. They make it worth just being there. It's one day out of the year I look forward to doing every year, and it takes 6 plus hours to do the 2 drafts, and I don't care. I would do it. I would do it once a month if they would let us. So
yeah.
It's great time like that. But
it's a lot more fun to compete against experts or at least serious players than to win a league against people that don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
It's
big
just a
difference.
lot. The challenge is so much greater when you're competing. Why don't you name some of the people in your league last year, in your classic league last year?
Yeah, the ones that come immediately to mind: Drew Davenport, Marcus Grant, Hutchinson Brown.
He was on our show. I like Hutch. He's a good kid.
Yeah, he's got such a bright future ahead of him.
I think so. Yeah.
He's got a great present, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
But he's smart, but he's also personable.
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
And I think
definitely.
that really helps in our industry. I do.
Ryan McDowell,
Yeah.
Dwayne McFarland. Actually, you know what? I'm thinking 2 years ago. Sorry, Dwayne
But Drew
McFarland
is coming on to the Game Changers, I believe.
next week.
thought I
Yeah,
saw
next
that.
week.
Yeah. So, I mean, those that don't know, the Game Changers is not a hardcore fantasy show. It's a fantasy interview show where they interview fantasy experts. And it's two ladies that really aren't what they consider fantasy experts, but they're personable and they have their own show, and I take credit for that somewhat, but I think JC and Iggy should take as much credit. I was I was coming back, and I started the first women's only fantasy league years ago. It was called Women of Fantasy Football, and I ran it until 2016, which is when I stepped away. And Tina Gunter is now the commissioner of it, and she kept it going. Now, Mike Hall, again, I love my fantasy league because Mike Hall did this. He copped their league, he gave it to them free for years while I was gone. And so Tina was running it. So I just thought there's this thing called Women of Fantasy Football now, a group of women. And some of them, Carla and Wendy, have interviewed. And I went to them to see if they would be interested in interviewing the woman that commissions the oldest and longest running women only fantasy football league. And they showed no interest at all. So I said, well, I'm going to do it because I think people need to know. And so I met Carla and I met Wendy at the expo. So I reached out to Wendy first because I knew her better. I only met Carla in passing with you, but those are the two women I really met and felt comfortable with. So I reached out and asked both of them if they would help. They enjoyed it so much that they decided they wanted to do a show. And Iggy and JC had enough foresight. I got to tell you, that show they did last week was amazing. It was really, really good. If you're missing it, it's Tuesday nights at 9:30 Eastern, but next month they're going to Wednesday nights, and they're going to be earlier. But it's if you're looking for who do I start, who do I pick up, it's not that kind of show. But it's an excellent show. It really is a great fantasy show. And
Yeah, I do.
I know that Carla hits you up for fantasy information, probably for questions to ask these people. And I want to thank you for supporting women, because not everybody is secure enough in their own knowledge of the game to support other people in the game. And I've always just believed you grow your own stature by growing the hobby. You just grow the hobby. And I want to applaud you, Doug, because I think Carla's and Wendy are doing a wonderful job. I really do.
I agree. And
Sorry, Iggy, you were going to ask something.
No, yeah, it's good, Doug. Just talk whatever you want. I was gonna, since I've been going to the expo, you are on the auction panel. I quit running my home league, if you will, or my league of record for a year to start the charity league. We went back to it last year and we turned it into an auction league, and it's a lot of fun. You said that your King's Classic was 6 hours. Gary, a fellow, a fellow opponent, if you will, and the nominee, but he was also an opponent in George Blanda. He broke off to start the IDP league, not an auction league, but I do know that you're on the panel. You and Drew convinced me to turn my home league into an auction league. Talk about your first auction league. How did you come to become so passionate about it, and just anything you want to say about it, really.
Yeah, we were sorry to see Gary go last year. I know I was. Him and I have
You're talking Gary Davenport, right?
Gary Davenport.
Yeah, sorry, Gary Davenport. Yeah.
Yeah, we good naturedly rib each other throughout the year. So yeah, it's
he was on a podcast with me years ago on Blog Talk Radio. Gary and I go back to the 90s.
Yeah. Okay. That might explain his tweet from a couple nights ago then.
Okay.
Because you were wishing me good luck, and he said something about I see how it is or something else.
Yep. I do remember seeing that on there.
My first auction league is one I'm still a part of. It's with it's the Huddle Auction League. I think that one's been around since Corey Benini runs it now. I think it's been around since I want to say 2004.
Are Corey and Ryan brothers?
Corey and Ryan, yeah.
They're brothers, not cousins, right?
Correct.
Okay, so those that don't know, Ryan Benini and William Del Pilar formed KFFL back in the day.
Wow.
William did the hot off the wire, the news feed, and I think Ryan did pretty much everything else. Corey was later into the hobby than them. But you said the Huddle, is that still David Dory and Whitney Walter?
Whit Walter, he was in the league when I first started. David Dory's still in there, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
But I started in that league in 2008 or 2009. I think I've been in it 15 years now.
That's a long time for an auction league.
You got to love a league to stay in it 15 years.
Yeah.
No, you do. If people aren't participating, if you get the bad owner that just, I can't win, so I'm not going to do anything, or I'm going to try to screw somebody else up by trading away my best player to them.
Yeah.
You get that kind of owner, you don't stay in those leagues. You just don't.
So
you got to love that Huddle league.
Yeah, it's a great time. Howard Bender's in there. Howard always makes it funny. Makes the online. If I'm not the one driving the humor, he is, and it's.
You guys play off each other?
I think we do. I don't know if he thinks that or not, but I think we do. But anyhow, I'm glad you're giving me a chance to bring this up because. This past year, I shouldn't mention this if I'm really going to promote myself, but this past year was only the second time in my time in the league, so the 14, 15 years that I didn't make the playoffs. But because I do an auction article every year, and in this past year, I think I was able to say in 13 of the 14 years I was in the playoffs, or in the 14 years I've been in the playoffs, I made the playoffs 13 times, and made the championship game 7 times, and won 4 times. Something.
Doug, that is not miss 1 year, even if
exactly.
That's not a bad story for your reputation.
No. I'm saying because I missed the playoffs this past year. But,
but it's 1 year out of 15. That's
it's. I know that's why I wanted to add the context into that. Because, but seriously though, it's the ability, or at least the perceived ability, to decide who the cornerstones of your team are going to be every year. I believe that's what makes auctions fun.
Is this a redraft auction?
Yes.
So it's not a dynasty where you're just doing rookies. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, JC stole my guy. We just kept bidding each other up. In that home league, I told you, he knew I wanted Nick Chubb. I knew he wanted Nick Chubb, and I had to let him go. But, it worked out somewhat better for me. I didn't make the playoffs in that league. I think JC did too. But, yeah, I mean, I agree with you, man, because you get the idea, like you said, the potential. But sometimes you don't get to get the guy you really want. You just do you have a certain mark? I mean, did you say this is my hard line on the guy, or do you try to be fluid with your auction? I mean, just break down some strategy, pay us
first of all, before you do that, as a strategy, if I knew that JC and Iggy wanted a player, I'd bid them up.
Yeah, Greg was in there
with no
too,
intention of getting them. I'd bid them up. Do you do that? Do you bid? As long as there's 2 or 3 people in the active bidding, I'll keep pumping them. But when it gets down to just me and one other guy, then I'm out if I don't want the player.
I used to bid up people considerably more often than I do now. Now I'm generally, I don't let good value go I mean, I pick up good value whatever I think is good value. I try to pick that up as much as possible, obviously. But I kind of have. So obviously, I have a player list on my spreadsheet as I go into an auction, and I'll have my dollar value, what I consider my dollar value for each of these guys. If I have an asterisk or whatever I deem to be the label that sticks out to me, so it might be an asterisk, it might be like a blue highlight, something that lets me know that these are the guys I'm going to bid up an extra dollar or two if I have to. These are going to be my guys, right? I think that's critical. Iggy was saying something about like,
yeah, I bid in one. I was bidding up a couple quarterbacks in a Superflex league, and I won 4.
No, it was a non-super flex league.
Oh, none. Anyway,
I won
4. I won 4 quarterbacks. But I mean, I went into that league with 3 starting quarterbacks: Tua, Jalen Hurts, and somebody else. And then the 4th one was a starter. He's just not somebody that would normally be on a roster. And I think I was able to trade one of those guys for what I needed later anyway. I think I made the playoffs in that league, if I'm not mistaken. Was that your league, Iggy?
Yeah, that one's. I think that's the one we're talking about.
That's the Bay League, right?
Yeah, the Bay League, Bay and the Beast. So
yeah. So laugh at me.
Go ahead though, Doug. Sorry.
Well, I don't have. I mean, on my annual auction article, I have like a list of probably 7 or 10 rules that I follow now. But I'm not going to come up with any, or I'm not going to announce any earth-shattering notions here on this show. I mean, the old saying, the old martial arts. Bruce Lee, be like
water. Be water. Yeah.
That's critical.
Do you nominate players that you have no intention of getting?
I would say I do that most of the time.
I do that early in auctions.
Sorry.
I'll take a player that I think is going to have a down year, but is coming off a great year, and I'll put him out, and I will bid them up because I want them to think I want him. But again, my goal is 2 players, 2 other teams bidding with me. As soon as there's not 2 teams bidding with me, I'm done.
I like to, at the beginning of auctions, I like to nominate hyped up guys that I have no intention on buying. For example. So
that's a strategy. That is a good strategy, in my opinion. Because the auctions I've been in, I would say at least half the teams really don't know what they're doing. They think it's a draft. They see a player name and they think, oh shit, I can get him too. Pardon the language. Oh yeah, I can get him too. I can get that guy. Oh, wait a minute, I can get him too? Oh, I'm going after. They get crazy and they spend all their money early and they're down to minimum bids after.
Yep.
I would rather have the big pile after, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and then like we got about 7 or 8 minutes, and I do want to get to the FSWA, and I'm sure Greg has another question, but just, I think we laid out enough to entice people to try auction leagues. But if you just have one comment to kind of sum up what's your favorite part about it, I should say, and then I want to talk to you about the FSWA nominations as well.
Yeah, I think I've already laid out what I like about auctions. This is the way I usually describe auctions to people, or at least why I like them. In a redraft, you pick players that the league allows you to have. In an auction, that's in a stake draft. In an auction draft, you really get to pick who you want to build your team around. And unlike some other fantasy sports that you might play, back in the day when I played fantasy baseball, for example, you really needed to have good players. You really needed to have at least 6 or 7 good players to win a league. And in fantasy football, if you can have like 2 or 3 studs, my goal is to get a top 5 guy at every position. If you can get a top 5 guy at every position, you're probably either a 1 or 2 seed, or you're going to win a championship. But my point with auctions, though, is you get a lot more say in who those guys are going to be. And if you believe that you're that 5% better, or you that 5% more lucky, or however you want to lay it out for people, uh, there's a better chance of getting those three cornerstones. I think that's what most of our traditional leagues that we play in now. If you have three guys that are in the top five of their position, you're probably locked in a playoff spot. I mean, you might be locked up by.
All right, I'm going to go with one more auction question before I
Sure.
turn it back to Iggy for FSWA. There's a million different ways to structure your league, whether it's auction or not. But in some auctions I've been in, one of the things that I've found very exciting is that some leagues take the pool of money you have to build your team, and that's also the pool of money you have for free agency afterward, and you have to build.
Uh-oh. Did we lose
Oh.
Greg?
I think I know where he's going with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Greg,
I'll go ahead and talk, and if he comes on again.
Okay.
There you go, Doug.
So, have you ever played in a league like that where you had to budget money? And if
Never.
not, would you like to?
No, I have no desire to play in that kind of league where your free agent budget is determined on your auction budget.
Yeah.
Too much planning?
Well, I think you would more often not create a system of haves and have-nots. You have those, like in dynasty leagues, you have about 3 or 4 teams that are always playing for 2 or 3 years from now, and I think you'd have those 3 or 4 teams. I'm going to, if there's let's say it's a $200 budget, I'm saving $100. I'm saving $100 for the free, and meanwhile the other 7 or 8 teams have $10, $15 left of their budget, and good luck if Nick Chubb goes down in week 1 and Jerome Ford happens to be sitting on the waiver wire. You're not. Then you just. So I don't have any interest in doing that.
Yeah, man. To each their own. That's what I love about fantasy. You can play it a million different ways, and there's a perfect way for everybody. I firmly believe that. But let's get to these nomination, man. What an honor for the FSWA to be recognized by your peers, by the community, by your outstanding work, Doug, and your longevity into it. Is this your first year to be nominated for an FSWA award? Have you won a previous award? And then what were your thoughts when you initially received word that you were a nominee?
Wow, I think I need those questions again.
Okay, have you been nominated before?
No, this was my first set of nominations, and there's a little bit of a story behind that. I'll tell it real quick. Most of my work is spreadsheet or chart or table heavy. Back in the early days of submitting our own work for nomination or nominating our own work, you weren't able to copy and paste that stuff into the FSWA text box. I can remember spending up to an hour trying to get one of my tables in there, and it didn't work because there's no guarantee that the way it appeared to me was going to be the way it appeared to them. So that was that. So I took basically at least 5 years off of nominating my work because it wasn't fitting into the text box. It was only until Carla opened my eyes that, hey, I can just copy and paste this. Oh, okay. The other thing that didn't appeal to me, and I'm not. This isn't going to be. This isn't any kind of bitterness, I don't think. But the panel of judges is a group of teachers, and it's not avid fantasy.
What?
A group of teachers.
Okay.
It's not a panel of fantasy football analysts or high stakes players or anything like that.
So they're looking for grammar.
So, well, I mean, grammar is important. I've been writing long enough and worked for some high-profile sports websites long enough to be good at grammar. That's not a concern of mine. But for example, the article of the year, I mentioned this. I mentioned Brian Drake earlier. His article of the year was about a dad's perspective on his son playing fantasy football for the first time. Which is great for the makes my heart feel good crowd, but it's not helping anybody win money. And I'm not saying that to be bashed at all. I'm just saying that's what their choice.
No, I understand.
So I've noticed that in previous years where the panel will opt for more of the feel good or the human interest story than they will the ones that I follow this guy because he won me $10,000. So. and that's not the crowd I'm going to write to. I got into this to help the player, not to help somebody's heart feel good about you know the family carryover or anything like that. So anyway, so these were my first nominations, and I'll be happy if knowing that I finally broke through, so to speak, this year. And Greg, I know I thanked you on Twitter for this. And your words to me during the King's Classic, right along the breaks during the King's Classic drafts this year, that was enough of a push to get me to think along those lines, because I'd taken 5 years off because I was getting kind of frustrated with the process. So, Iggy, your other 2 questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just having trouble remembering them now. I think you pretty much answered them, though. It was like, what were your feelings once you found out that you were nominated? I think was the only one maybe we didn't cover. I guess you kind of did say, and breaking through the mold and stuff, but
yeah, equal parts shock and it's about time, if that makes sense. Shock because, again, I'd taken 5 years off because I was getting frustrated and kind of disillusioned by the process. It's about time because, again, Greg kind of mentioned to me something that I had felt since I was 6, which was I knew the process. I knew my writing was good enough. I knew the way I was tackling this was good, but I don't know how much of it has to do with FF maybe being a smaller site that doesn't really market itself. I don't know how much it has to do with. I don't even think it's politics. I just think it's one of those things where a lot of people aren't seeing my work. So,
let me tell you, Doug, different people have different styles and different people have different likes. I went into the Hall of Fame with Scott Engel. Okay. You've read his work. You know how he writes. I was very statistical oriented. I didn't do tables and stuff because it was all pure HTML back then. We had to put it into HTML. There wasn't any editing software. We had to actually write the HTML to format the articles. So I kept it as simple as I could. Matt Berry was a screenwriter, a professional screenwriter, and he wrote humorous articles. Now, I would put up content-wise my stuff against Matt Berry every day of the week in terms of good fantasy information. But his writing was much better than mine, much more professional, much more engaging. The flow was better. Okay, he's a professional writer. Some people like that, and that's fine because the hobby allows for that.
It does.
I think it's important that you resubmit it. I think that takes courage, and I think it also opens the. I'm always about, in my mind, the most important thing you can do is expand the hobby. If you expand the hobby, it's going to expand your reach. If you expand your reach, you expand your potential to make money. I was never about making money because I had a good paying job that I knew I was not going to give up. I was a computer guy. I wasn't going to give up that with a top secret clearance. So I wasn't going to give that up, to make, $20,000 doing fantasy football stuff. I think the first payday I got was $50 from Emil Cadlick for putting an article in one of his magazines. Now, Ian Allen and Dan and Kelly Grogan also did magazines, and Emil had 3, 4, 5. I got to ask you, though, I'm glad you submitted. I hope you continue submitting.
Oh, I will.
In 2004, I won the best ongoing series. So it's basically the same article every week through the whole season.
Right.
Okay. 2006, that same article won again. John Georgopoulos wrote it that year. I had quit writing it, and he took it over because it was a good article. And John won with it that year. That's my challenge to you. Win one, and then win it again a year or two later with the same article. But actually, what I want to ask your opinion, what's more important, go to the expo or join the FSWA? Or would you just say do both?
Well,
content creators.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know I would go to the expo first, and then probably join the FSW shortly after that. But no, I think anybody that has any kind of interest in this hobby owes it to themselves to go to the expo, and succeeding in this industry is probably as hard as it's ever been. Like getting into the industry is probably as easy as it's ever been. And if you're able to rub enough of the right elbows at the expo, when you go to the expo, you can probably fast track your writing career if that's what you want to make it. Obviously, you can fast track your writing career exponentially.
JC and Iggy, when I started my site, it was comments.com with a K, KOMMENTS.com. And that site was entirely to give young writers, young content creators, a place to put their, I didn't pay them for their work. I edited it for free and I posted it. And if they could market an advertisement, they were welcome to do that. But I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it to grow the hobby. The piece of advice I will give any young content creator, with the web, you can go out and you can do podcasts. That's what I'm doing now. I'm doing a podcast. Okay. It would take me 4 to 6 hours to write a single article because of the research involved and then the double checking all my spelling and grammar. The worst thing you can do on a podcast is to mispronounce a player's name. People won't think you're serious if you can't pronounce the players' names. The worst thing you can do when you're writing is grammatical or spelling errors, because again, your credibility goes out and it's hard to get it back. So what I would advise, the sports affiliation will probably publish anyone that will provide them content on a continuing basis. They're not a one-off site, but if you want to do a weekly article, I'll bet you could get it published and get it looked at by professionals that can give you advice on how to grow your thing. But my advice to everybody, get your work in front of as many eyes as you can. And so at my height, I was actually being published on 36 sites.
Wow.
And these were the bigger sites, Fantasy Sharks, Fantasy Football Guys, Mr. Football. I was getting it everywhere. And my one rule to all of them was you can't put it behind a paywall because you're not paying me for it because I don't want your money. And it's not going to be exclusive because I'm going to put it on at different sites. Now, there's not a lot of people that have done that in the history of fantasy football. I did. And I think that's why I went into the Hall of Fame, is because everybody knew me. I didn't nominate myself for the award. I didn't nominate myself for the Hall of Fame. I never would have occurred to me to do that. But nowadays you kind of have to. But I got to tell you, the people I've met in this industry, I've told this story a lot. Bob Harris and I would be on the phone till 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. I would call him up. I worked a 50 to 60 hour job, day job. And then I'd spend 40 to 60 hours doing fantasy football, writing and publishing and talking to Bob Harris on the phone till 3 in the morning my time, and then getting up at 6 or 7 in the morning to go to work. I would do pretty much anything for Bob, for Steve, for the people that I know in this industry, because they've pretty much done everything for me in the industry. They didn't make me rich. I didn't want to get rich, but they helped me grow the hobby. My proudest accomplishment is not the Hall of Fame. It's not the article of the year. My proudest accomplishment is the people that I've met along the way. I've met so many great people. Doug, you're one of them. Iggy, you're one of them. JC in the background is one of them. These people I know Wendy says Bob is her bestie. Bob used to send out his information on a fax. He would actually call a fax number, an automated fax number. I would call him and interrupt the fax. I didn't realize I was doing that. This year, he told me that he took my call when the fax was going in and had to restart the fax afterward. The type of people in this industry are the best people in the world, in any industry. And I got to tell you, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong. Young guy says, would you read an article? Will you read it?
Yeah.
You don't know him? You don't know him from Adam? will you give him positive, constructive feedback? Even if it's got to be, you need more work, this is where I'd focus on. Will you give that type of feedback to him?
If someone reaches out to me directly and asks me what I think of their stuff, of course
That's what's called a mentor. Okay?
Hmm.
We've all had mentors if we've succeeded in this business. Doug, who's yours?
Oof.
I know you started writing right away before you had any, but over the years, I'm sure some people have guided you. So, of those people, name 1, 2, 3. I don't care. Just who are your mentors? Who do you look up to?
See, that's the funny thing. So, I mean, I have people that I consider, very good in the industry that I bounce off ideas off of now. But, and that was going to tie into what I was going to say. Remind me to come back around to answering your question here.
Okay.
Something I would tell young writers now, and it's something I have to do a much better job of myself, is promoting myself. I grew up, I'm sure you grew up, and I'm sure Iggy grew up in a time where, what do they say about athletes in every sport? If you're good, someone will find you.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what they say about the combine.
Yeah, maybe that's true here. And I think it was true when I was, and I'm of course, I'm just assuming that I've been good all along. I'm not here to say that.
In the 2000s, that was true. I'm not sure that's true today.
And I can base it off of, I can remember getting, I had a national weekly appearance on a radio station in Washington, D.C. back in the early, in 2010, 2011. Actually, still a guy named Bill Rowland, he's out of Washington, D.C., or was out of Washington, D.C. I still keep in contact with him. So, but for a 2-year stretch, and then here and there for years after that, I didn't reach out to him. He reached out to me. He reached out to my crew, and then we had a little setup. I was getting on Sirius XM, on occasion again. So like 2013, and then there was a long dry period, and I'm wondering what the heck changed, right?
Steve Cohen took over.
No.
And he had his own vision for the site and the people that he knew he wanted on it. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm not blaming
No, but that's what changed.
But I'm saying the industry, in this industry as a whole. I mean, the radio, the people reaching out for radio appearances, the people reaching out, that just stopped almost for like a 4 or 5 year stretch. And again, the whole self promotion thing is something I probably will never be comfortable with. But even if it's something as simple as just remembering to post and tweet out your work after you've done it. And I was getting, and I still have to remind myself to not get into this mindset. But it's hard to continue to do that day after day, week after week, when you see that there are 300 impressions, 1 like, 0 likes, no replies.
Yeah, so you can't do that. I did that with this show.
Yeah.
I'd go out to YouTube and I'd look, and we interviewed Mike Clay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know, I've known Mike for years. Okay. And Mike's a good guy, a really good guy.
Yes.
And one of the guys that I mentored was a guy named Jim Day, Fantasy Tab.
Yeah,
unfortunately, I got contacted by Jim and his wife just months before Jim passed. And so Mike reached out to me to tell him stories about Jim, because I knew Jim when Jim got started. And Jim had mentored Mike. Now, Mike is on-air talent, okay? ESPN on-air talent. That name alone should spark interest in a podcast, okay? We're going to talk to Mike about how he got to be on-air talent for ESPN, okay? 36 views on YouTube. Okay, talk about getting frustrated. I was frustrated. I went to JC and Iggy, and they showed me the Twitter views, because this broadcasts on X at the same time. Couple thousand. Now, a couple thousand is much better for a podcast than 36. But if I'm doing this for the views, I've told JC and Iggy, I don't want money for this. I'm not going to monetize it on YouTube. don't care about the money at all. But I want to make sure I'm not wasting my time.
Exactly. That's exactly what. Yeah. Exactly.
And if 5 people watch it and love it, I'm not wasting my time. I'm really not. If I inspire one of those people to become a content creator and he creates content that gets a wider spread, then I definitely didn't waste my time because I helped one person. And it's all about helping others. So, again, you said to remind you, mentors.
So mentors. So I really I hear people talk about and when they are asked this type of question, and they almost always have a list of 3 to 5 people. And for the longest time, I felt up really until the time of the expo. So think about that. I started writing in 2000. Okay, it wasn't until about the expo 18 years later that I felt as though maybe somebody out there had some respect for my work. Okay.
Oh, I think a lot of people had respect for your work.
They might
just
have.
might not hear it. Yeah, but I
That's
think
what-
Mike Kruger would be one of your mentors. He published you for years.
Yeah, he published me for years, but I mean, he's pretty much let me do my own thing, and there's not a lot of, okay, Doug, here's love this, and this.
Work on this.
Work on this, and this. So I've had the freedom to do pretty much what I want when I want it. And if there's something I really want to change, then or there's an idea that I think the site needs. So I've been in kind of an idea engine, so to speak, for him. And I mean, he's believed in my work. Obviously, he wouldn't continue to employ me and post my work if he didn't believe in me. So, but as far as people who, so I think, unfortunately, I think I'm one of the rare people.
You don't have a Bob Harris.
I never did, because that wasn't an option for me for most of those first 18 years of the industry. I knew of Bob Harris. I knew of a lot of these people, but reaching out to them wasn't something that. Now it seems like it's encouraged. I didn't feel that way for a large part of the time I've been in the industry.
Are you an introvert in normal life?
No, I don't think so.
See, I'm an extrovert. I'll talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime. I don't think Bob reached out to me. I think I reached out to him, but he gave me his phone number. And we got started in the old Usenet groups, rec.sport.football.fantasy, RSFF. That's where we all got started. There was no internet. That was it, the Usenet group. And you say Usenet now and nobody knows what you're talking about. But think of your modern form. Think of Reddit. Think of Reddit. And that's what Usenet was. It was like a beginning Reddit. It was just text, and it was there was no graphics. It was just text, and it was just people exchanging ideas. And I guess I was fortunate in that I met Joe Bryant. He runs Football Guys, for those that don't know, before there was a Football Guys. and what we noticed was that, I know we're going overtime, but we noticed that there were 3 groups of people in Usenet. There were guys that were trying to sell what they knew. We called those the pros. There were guys that really felt they were as smart as the guys that were selling what they knew, and they seemed to be as smart. So we called those guys the experts. You had the pros, the experts, and then there were trolls. There were guys that would just throw stones at anybody that was trying to sell anything. Some of these trolls were pretty sharp. So my idea, and I ran it by Joe, and we started it together, was to create a league, 12-team league, 4 pros, 4 experts, and 4 trolls. And we called it FanX, the Fantasy Experts League. And to this day, I remember the only troll I remember was Mark Nolte, who Mark was a good guy, but I mean, he threw stones. He just did. The experts were guys like myself, and there were a couple of us. but we became pros afterwards, except I wasn't really trying to sell anything, but I was publishing, which I hadn't been before. And then when I went to work for Fox Sports in 2000, 2001, they wanted me to bring FanX with me. So basically, FanX became a Fox Sports league for 1 year, and we kept it with my fantasy league because I'm loyal. You know, if I like you, I'm going to support you no matter what. And I love Mike Hall, I really do. And I think Kevin Austin has died, but Kevin was instrumental in taking Mike's application from a laptop application to a web-based application. My fantasy league was not always an online application. Okay. I tried to get Fox to buy them out and use that as their engine, but didn't work. But anyway, that's what FanX became. And then it became purely expert, and then it expanded to there's an auction draft. The fad was really my favorite thing. That we used to go to conventions in Vegas that Fantasy Insights put on. And Fantasy Insights was Jim Lins and James Serra. And they would host it at the Tropicana, and we'd all come in. We'd do the FanX live draft there. And we do the fad. And the fad was just an offshoot of the live draft. We do the live draft in front of a crowd. Now, see, that's where I think you guys miss out on the expo. You should set up one of the King's Classic drafts on a stage. Do the draft with an audience and allow audiences to ask questions each round. Take 3 or 4 questions from the audience each round and publish it. And then all of our owners at the end of the draft would have to give the analysis of why they chose that player at that time. That's the FanX analysis draft, which is still being run by Chris Rito and still active to this day. But I just think that I've already told Bob that if he has an opening in King's Classic, I'd love to get in. Whether it comes, I don't want anybody kicked out for me. I don't want that. But if there's an opening, and I don't care if it's auction, I really don't think I'm qualified for IDP. I really don't. But I've played IDP, but I don't keep up with the players. But I think I'm qualified for any of the other ones. I would love to do that live at the expo. I think that would be such a show. But, you know, I can recommend. I can't do it, you know.
You know, and this is, again, cut me off, cut us off whenever you want to at BB and JC. But I know Carla's asked this question before on her show about, and by the way, I really like what you're proposing there, by the way. Maybe that's something the Blind division can do because the Jim Brown division gets to be covered on SiriusXM.
SiriusXM,
yeah.
So, and I can tell you, I can't tell you to a man now. I can tell you almost to a man before, because the room has changed a little bit in the last, say, 2 years. But I can tell you almost to a man before that there is definitely a, I don't think inferiority complex in the blended division, because I don't think there's anybody in the blended division that wants to lead the blended division, because we that's such a great group of guys, but we all want to be in the Brown division to.
You want the Sirius XM
to kick their ass.
Well, not just that, but also the exposure. The exposure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Doug.
And the question that Carla posed, I think it was to Jim Coventry, by the way. And Jim had a great answer for it, as he has a great answer for just about everything. SiriusXM is primarily concerned with, just like anything else, it's a ratings thing, right? And so they're going to bring on the people they know, the people that with the network that understand that, hey, I need to be out in 30 seconds, okay, and they can have it in their mind. They're already thinking 20, 30 seconds, right? And they don't want to run the risk of some wild card like me who might have something insightful to say, but it's going to take 45 seconds. Well, we can't have it, right? Yeah. So, whereas I think that would be a great way to differentiate Blanda from Brown and still and be able to avoid that inferiority complex, get us interactive with the crowd, allow us to present our opinions, allow us to do all that great stuff. And yeah, if you want to propose that to Bob, I'll propose that to Bob if you don't want to. That's I think that's great.
I mean, I'll back up on it, and hell, we can just have them listen to the tape. But yeah, I think it'd be a great idea because it was always popular in the Vegas expos. Well, we call them conventions. Bob does a great job. I think the expos are wonderful.
It really is.
And I think anybody that loves fantasy football, especially if you live in the area, should go. I got to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I didn't have to pay for a ticket because it was included in the package last year. Now, it's not included this year. It's not included this year. I checked, but it was included last year. And just being there, I'd spend the $30 to go. I mean,
yeah, I'm going to do it again. I think I'm going to pay again. And then we also have, it's pretty honored to have Mauricio Gutierrez as well from NFL Network saying that you got a great idea, Bob. I'm pretty sure Mauricio's is he in the Blender and the Brown?
I met Mauricio. Yeah. I met Mauricio at the Expo last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember that, Mauricio?
Yeah, the Expo always, man. It brought us all together. But is he in the Blender with you, or is he in the redraft?
Mauricio and Scott Engel, yeah, we've got a really good room. There's I'm coming up short on I think some of the fantasy points guys, but yeah, Mauricio and Scott Engel along with the guys I said before, Drew Davenport, Hutch, and JJ Zacharyson was in there last year.
JJ, yeah.
JJ won this year.
He won an award. Yep, he did.
Yeah,
so
JJ won. I had JJ's another name that I've known for years, but I never met.
Exactly.
So, did he go to the Expo last year?
This past year was his first year.
That's
okay,
right.
well, hopefully he'll be there next year, and you can introduce me to him. Okay. You and I just kind of met in passing in the hallway.
You and me, yeah. Well, yeah. You want me to tell a story real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was Carl and I came together this year, right? And I was heading up to the 6th floor to put our stuff into our room. I think Greg approaches Carla and asks if she would want to take a picture with him, and she said, "Well, my boyfriend's taking our stuff up to the room. Wait until he gets back." And so then we ended up taking a picture together, and through taking the picture together, then we started talking, and lo and behold, I've talked to Greg virtually for 3 or 4 times this year. So. Already this year.
And you're welcome to call me anytime. If you don't have my number, ask Carla, and she can get my number from Iggy and JC.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it on the air. Sorry, just won't do that. But hey,
let me guess.
Retired. I got time. I'm retired.
The prefix is 555, right?
No, it's 1-900.
hey, we do. And Mauricio was the champion. You forgot to mention that there, Doug. In the competitive spirit, he won the auction league this year.
Wink. I'd already checked out at that point because my teams were centered around Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, and whoever else. So.
Well, welcome to the club with the Nick Chubb. I do want to say, Greg, do you have anything to say? I can send us out of here because I got 2 things I got to say.
I want to say thank you for coming on, Doug. For those that don't know, we were supposed to have an old compatriot of mine at Fox Sports, a guy that went from Fox Sports straight to MLB.com. He's a big baseball guy and is also a screenwriter, and apparently wrote some episodes for the Mickey Mouse Club.
Whoa.
So we're going to get him next week, but Doug was scheduled for next week, and he was kind enough with 2 days notice to step up and offer to come on. And Doug, it's been a great show. I really do appreciate you stepping up to the plate.
Well, in the short time we know each other, I think I feel similarly to the way you feel. I'm glad that I met you, and I would do pretty much anything for you guys, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, and I just
if you ever get a content creator that needs to be published and it's not quite good enough for FF Today, or is too good for FF Today, including yourself, Talk to Iggy and JC because they're looking to build the content side up of the website.
Yeah, definitely look forward to possibly working together. Maybe we can get Doug on our website, thesportsaffiliation.com. Remember, you can like and subscribe to the show for us at, just click the button if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment if you're watching on X or Facebook. We do go through those. JC's been great behind the booth. But I do got to say, Doug, we got 3 seconds in the lane. I think we kept you a little long there, but we'll let that one slide, until
basketball
it matters.
reference. Can you believe that? Football show and he's doing a basketball.
Hey, I'm not finished yet, Greg, because Tipp would be so proud today. We made it not just one show. We made it 90 minutes without Greg making a Michigan reference on the day of the Combine. We didn't even talk about the Combine.
I don't need to.
Because
you guys
we knew
know who the national champions are.
We knew it.
You
we
know
knew
who the
we
national
going to go
champions
straight to
are.
Michigan. We couldn't have a whole show of that for you, Doug. But please go follow Doug, man.
Yeah. Notice behind me, that side. No, that side. Notice behind me. I don't have to make a Michigan reference.
Hey, Mauricio, we love you too, amigo. Thanks for coming in and hopping in. Great show, Doug, man. Dropping the knowledge. Where can everybody find your work? Where can they find you on social media?
FF Today.
Yeah.
FF Today. At Doug Orth, as it says on the screen there. And I want to plug one other thing for you. You guys are familiar with JJ Winter, correct?
Yes. Yeah. JT and I are. Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't met JJ, you should meet him at the Expo this year. Him and I are going to start doing a podcast after the draft, after the NFL draft.
If you ever need a guest, call. I will definitely return the favor. And if you ever want to break some news on our show, just remember it's Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern. You're always welcome.
Yeah, I can't wait for you and JJ, two of the greatest people I met at the Expo. Like I said, we just developed a relationship. I saw Doug 2 years ago with Carla. We hung out. We had a great time. We were stoked to see each other last year. Got to hang out a little bit more, and I can't wait to hang out again this upcoming year. Thanks again, Doug, for being on. JC, man, do your thing and get us out of here.